Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today for our tax credit program application workshop. My name is Melissa Latham, and I'm the Director of Communications and Policy at CDFA. Just to go over a quick agenda, we anticipate today's presentation will run from now until about 11:30. That's going to include time for questions. So as you have questions, please do not hesitate to drop them into the Q&A box. We will be monitoring that throughout the presentation and pausing to answer those questions during today's presentation. We are recording today's webinar and we'll share that along with presentation slides and other relevant materials following today's webinar. So this morning we're going to cover a quick recap of how the tax credit works, and then we're going to dive into really digging into the tax credit program application. We'll discuss our clean energy policy as well as data resources, and give you a brief overview of how to navigate our grants management system, and then talk through next steps if you're looking to pursue an application, what you should be doing next. And again, we will be answering questions throughout today's presentation, so please do add those to the Q&A box during the session. If you could just take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, along with the organization that you're here representing today. And if you'd like, share a few words about why you're interested in the tax credit program or about the potential project that you're looking to apply for. And with that, I'm going to have our team come on video and introduce themselves, starting with Betsy.
Thanks for being here. My name is Betsy McNamara. I'm a principal with Full Circle Consulting, and this year I'm working with CDFA on supporting the oversight of the tax credit program, as well as serving as a reviewer.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Maureen Quinn, and I'm the Tax Credit Program Manager at CDFA. I work with projects from application through closeout of a tax credit award.
Good morning, I'm Ian Hart. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at CDFA, and I'm involved in the financial review of applications.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Bover. I am the Director of Community Development, and I will be helping to review tax credit applications.
Good morning. I'm Scott Maslansky. I'm the Director of Clean Energy Finance, and I also manage our energy policy requirement, as well as I'm a reviewer for tax credit applications.
Good morning. My name is Melanie Steenbeck. I am CDFA's contract manager, and I am the person you will interact with when you're registering for CDFA's grants management system.
Good morning. My name is Nate Olson, and I support the CDFA with their data and technology work. In this particular space, if you run into any technical issues with our grants management system, you might interact with me.
Excellent, thank you. So you'll be hearing from various members of our team this morning throughout the presentation, and then also as they mentioned during the application process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott to review how the tax credit works, just as a refresher from Tuesday's presentation.
All right, just wanted to provide a bit of a recap on how the tax credit works. CDFA is committed to supporting applicants and awardees throughout the entire process. We will work closely with potential applicants during the pre-application phase to understand their needs, align those needs with our technical assistance and financing resources, to understand other potential sources of support, as well as to strengthen the project's capacity, each project's capacity for success by addressing any potential challenges early on. A quick explanation of the tax credit program, and this applies to both parts of the program, including capacity building. How the tax credit works. Nonprofits are awarded an allocation of tax credits for a fundraising campaign. Instead of asking for cash contributions, they raise tax credit donations from businesses. The business then pays the donation to CDFA, Once the donation is made, the business will receive a tax credit letter that confirms their donation. For every dollar the business contributes to your project, they will get back 75 cents in state business tax relief. A business can claim the tax credit on their business profits tax, the BPT, the business enterprise tax, the BET, or the insurance premium tax, the IPT. They may carry forward the credit for up to 5 years. Their contribution may also be eligible as a state and federal charitable contribution. Please note that donors should check with their tax advisors about the potential for additional tax benefits. The tax credit program helps a participating company significantly increase their community impact by leveraging their tax credit dollars to invest in important projects within their local community. The tax credits are different than grants. There are 5 steps, and step 5 is when you would receive your funds. Step 1, CDFA has awarded you tax credits and your tax credit allocation. Step 2, you'll secure pledges from New Hampshire businesses. And step 3 is the business will pay their donation to CDFA. Step 4, CDFA provides the business with a tax credit letter documenting the donation. And finally, step 5, funds for projects are available to be released to you when you've completed your entire fundraising. Note that CDFA retains a 20% program fee on all business donations. The tax credit program receives no funding from the state general fund. This is how we're able to administer the program. If your project receives, for example, a $10,000 donation from a business, it will net out $8,000 for your project. So a little bit about the process and timeline. The tax credits you are applying for are for state fiscal years 2027 and 2028. For those that receive a tax credit award, here's the bit of the timeline. On June 24th, 2026, we will have a virtual tax credit 101 training where we cover how to fundraise and manage your tax credit allocation. July 15th, 2026 is the Managing Your Tax Credit Award Workshop. This is where you'll learn more about documentation, reporting requirements, using our grants management system, etc. Also in July 2026, the fundraising phase starts. That's the area in red there. At this point, you can secure pledges for tax credits allocated to your project. And then skipping to March 31st of 2027, all pledges for the state fiscal year 2027 tax credits are due at that time. And in June 30th of 2027, the businesses must fulfill their state fiscal year 27 pledges by giving the funding to CDFA. If your project also receives state fiscal year 28 credits, you will follow the same timeline starting July 1st, 27 and ending June 30th, 28. Please be aware that if you receive notification of a tax credit award in June, your project does not receive funding until your tax credits are sold and the businesses have made their payments to CDFA. Now I'll hand it over to Betsy, who will provide an overview of the tax credit application.
Everybody, we're going to go through the application, and but I just want to say that the tax credit application and program guide is a wealth of knowledge for you, and it has all of the information that we're providing here. It's definitely the first place to go if you have questions as you're writing the application. And I think Melissa's going to put a link to that in the chat for this webinar, and it will be in the follow-up email to this webinar. Just to start, it's really helpful as you're writing your application to know what CDFA is looking for when it's evaluating the applications it receives. The evaluation that CDFA does of the applications focuses on impact and readiness. And so we receive applications demonstrating many different levels of public benefit or public purpose and different levels of readiness. Yours will be most competitive if you can demonstrate both high public benefit, public purpose, and high readiness. Here's a description, and you'll find this in the app and program guide of what we mean by public benefit and public purpose. CDFA's tax credit program seeks to advance community economic development projects that show a high degree of community support, build partnerships, and leverage other resources. These are literally pulled from CDFA's founding legislation, which is New Hampshire RSA 162L. And it specifically says that the funding must go to programs that are of public benefit for a public purpose and can be reasonably expected to address one or more of the following objectives: contribute to the development or redevelopment and economic well-being of target areas or target populations, contribute to the economic development of the state, increase or maintain threatened primary employment, and provide affordable housing opportunities to low and moderate income people. Most applications that we receive do demonstrate a clear public benefit and public purpose, but about 50% of the applications take off all aspects of readiness. So we really look at readiness as a framework. It's not a hard and fast rule. We balance the readiness with public benefit, and we really work to ensure benefit and support readiness. These are the four components of what we mean by a readiness framework. So it's community engagement and support, a proven need for the project and proven need for the funding, capacity to carry out the project, and networks within the business community to support you in securing those pledges. We do, of course, understand that this is a challenging climate for nonprofits right now, and to find other funding commitments for the entire project. We just want to work with you. Please don't feel that you have to sugarcoat how difficult things are now. We understand, and we really want to hear what the real situation is for you so that we can best work with you. We're going to go now through all the components of the tax credit application, and the intention is, in doing so, is to break down what can seem like an overwhelming application into bite-sized chunks. And as we go through each section, we'll share what CDFA is looking for in the application. The application itself lives in CDFA's Grants Management System, or GMS, and later in the webinar, Nate will walk us through how to register for the Grants Management System and start an application. So let's begin. And I'm going to start with the very last component of the application, which is certification. CDFA requires that every organization submit a certification from their authorized official to confirm a couple things: that all these statements are true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, and that the application is being submitted with the full knowledge and approval of the organization's board, that your organization follows New Hampshire conflict of interest laws, that you acknowledge all information and documents created, accepted, or obtained by or on behalf of CDFA are potentially subject to disclosure in compliance with New Hampshire's right to know law, and that the organization will accept CDFA's standard 10-year performance lien, and we'll go into the lien as well. The certification needs to be signed by what we call an authorized official. So who is that? This is typically the CEO or board president. You need to download and print out the certification to get their actual signature on this document. Seasoned fundraiser tip: be sure to get that signature well before the deadline of the application, so you're not scrambling to find your CEO or board president the day before the deadline. I speak from my own experience. So now, starting at the beginning again, the first section is collecting information about your project. And this is actually the information you give when you register for the Grants Management System. So you are either a new registrant and you fill out all this information, or you're a previous user and need to update your user profile. If you are a previous user and need to update your user profile, please reach out to Mel Steenbeek, who you met in the introduction. A tip for you here on the application title: a very clear and short title for the application is important. This title lives with you for the life of the loan, so make sure that it is succinct and clear and short. Okay. Next is statutory eligibility. CDFA's founding legislation and foundational guidance for the tax credit program can be found in New Hampshire RSA 162L, and there's actually a link to that in the app and program guide. So in order to receive a tax credit award, an applicant must achieve statutory eligibility. And to do so, applicants must fit one of these organization types. This is a drop-down menu in the application. So you're either a community development corporation, a nonprofit organization involved in community development, a municipal government employee cooperative, or another type of cooperative. We also talk about a project type, housing, community economic development, or both. I want to circle back to the eligible applicant. Some applicants are using a fiscal sponsor, and we're going to use that term throughout this webinar. If you have a fiscal sponsor, the information about the statutory eligibility is all about the fiscal sponsor, not about your project. So continuing on statutory eligibility, we have what we call threshold attachments. These documents serve to confirm that your organization is eligible. Some of these attachments are required and some are optional. If you are a nonprofit, CDFA will need the documentation listed here. So the articles of incorporation, bylaws, IRS determination, etc., is listed here. If for some reason you think you are eligible, but one or more of these attachments are not applicable to your organization, please contact CDFA. And if the project is using a fiscal sponsor, again, the requested documents are for the fiscal sponsor unless otherwise stated. We do have fiscal sponsor guidance. There's a link to that in the application and program guides, and I think Melissa will link it in the chat as well. If you do have a fiscal sponsor, you need a fiscal sponsor agreement and financials as detailed in the fiscal sponsor guidance. The next section is the tax credit request. So tax credits are typically awarded over 2 state fiscal years. We do ask at this point that you break down what your award is. So pretend you're asking for $250,000. Would your project benefit from 125 the first year and 125 the second, or does it make more sense to request 50 the first year and 100, now I forgot my math, the rest of it the second year? We ask that all applicants request the amount of tax credits that are really needed for your project. It doesn't not help actually to inflate your request. Just really ask for what you need for the project to succeed. A reminder that CDFA, as Scott mentioned, takes 20% of the award. So enter the GMS does the calculation for you. So you enter what you need in GMS and it will calculate your total award. So if your project needs $120,000 to succeed, GMS will calculate the total award to $144,000. The project is then responsible for securing pledges totaling $144,000 and receives $120,000. If your project were to receive a tax credit award, the award may not be distributed in the exact fiscal years you requested. Still, your answer to this question helps us make allocation decisions. This is a reminder when we're talking about state fiscal years. The state fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30 and are named after the calendar year in which they end. So we are currently in state fiscal year 2026, which ends June 30, 2026. This application round are for tax credits in state fiscal year 2027 and 2028. Now we're getting into a little more detail about the project. So project name, again, the tip is to keep it short and simple. Project address, this is where you let us know where the project will be located. So if you are an entity that is creating a new affordable housing development, we want to know the address of that development. And then the roles, who's the authorized official, if you have a grant writer, and then a primary contact for the application. And a fiscally sponsored entity name if applicable. The fiscally sponsored entity is the project, initiative, or community group whose work will be carried out under a formal fiscal sponsorship agreement with an eligible 501c3 organization. While the fiscal sponsor assumes legal and financial responsibility for the grant, the fiscally sponsored entity is typically responsible for the day-to-day implementation of the proposed project. Most applicants to this tax credit program do not use a fiscal sponsor. So if you do not have a fiscal sponsor, you just leave that blank. Executive summary. This is a brief and concise description of the project you're seeking tax credits for, why you're seeking them, the problem you are addressing, and the outcome you are expecting. Another tip from a longtime fundraiser, write this section last because it's extremely hard to write a summary of something that you haven't yet written. Now we're getting into the meat of the narrative. This section is project description, and this is a big part of the application. Here we want to learn more details about the project and understand how ready the project is to move forward if it receives a CDFA tax credit award. There are 4 components to this section. First, if this project involves the acquisition, construction, or renovation of real estate, you are asked to describe the property, its ownership structure, and the status of site control. So for example, if you have your eye on a building or a property, but haven't yet achieved a purchase and sale agreement, it might be too early for you to apply for a tax credit application. Are you doing leasehold improvements? We'd like you to list any mortgages or deed restrictions that are on the property. Is there anything that would prevent CDFA from putting a use restricting mortgage lien on the property? We'll also ask you to attach, if appropriate, a recent property appraisal, planning and zoning approvals, and an asset management plan, which is a projection of future capital improvement costs. In the project information and public benefit attachment section of the application, so we'll go through those in more detail later. The second aspect of the project description is the performance lien. So CDFA places a 10-year performance lien on any property purchased, developed, or renovated with tax credit funds. And this simply means that CDFA seeks to have the option of having a prorated portion of tax credit funds returned if there is a sale or change of use in the property for 10 years. If you cannot provide a mortgage lien, you'll be asked to indicate the type of performance lien you will provide if you are awarded tax credits. You'll be asked that in the application. There is a link to guidance about the performance lien in the tax credit application and program guide. And of course, you can reach out to the CDFA team with questions. The third component of the project description is that you have the opportunity to provide detail about the project timeline and document readiness. So really, when we're asking, when is the project going to begin? When will it be complete? If the project includes construction, where are you on the status of architectural and engineering plans and cost estimates? What permits, approvals, agreements, or other requirements are necessary to complete the project? Have they been secured? Have all those permits and approvals been secured? If not, what's your strategy and the timeline for securing them? And then the final aspect of the project description is applicants are expected to adhere to the CDFA energy policy, and Scott is going to go into this in more detail later on in this workshop. Are there any questions at this point, or should I proceed?
We do have a couple of questions, Betsy, if you don't mind. So one is stating that they're an all-volunteer group. Is there any help in writing our application?
Here's the day. Yes, we're going to go into this later. There is grant writing assistance, and I will. The caveat is the deadline is tomorrow. It's actually been open since October 31st. So we have 2 awards left to give. And again, the deadline is tomorrow. We will talk more in detail about that toward the end of this workshop webinar.
Yep, and I'll drop another link to that in the
Oh,
chat
thanks.
as well.
Yeah.
There's also links in the application and program guide to those resources.
Right.
And then just a question around eligibility. A nonprofit involved in community development, is this a formal category like economic development, or is it more broadly interpreted? The example given is a early childhood coalition or United Way.
I would say it's more broadly defined. I mean, so for example, one of our awardees last year was Gather, which is focused on food security and food distribution and education. And we really see that as a benefit to community and ensuring that and providing creating community economic development for a priority population, people who are low income and food insecure. So I would say it's broadly fine. But a reminder that this tax credit application is very typically for bricks and mortar projects, so building projects. So if you're a coalition or your early childhood organization is focused on a bricks and mortar type project, this is more applicable to you. Next Tuesday, we are having a webinar on the capacity building tax credit program, which provides more organizational development support.
Excellent. That's all I'm seeing right now in the chat. So we'll move forward.
Okay, great. So this section, public benefit and public purpose, folks, the bulk of your narrative information will be in this section. This is where you make the case that your project fits the tax credit program mission of providing public benefit for a public purpose within the context of the tax credit program priorities and objectives. So if we ask that you describe your community economic development or housing issue that your organization will address. Is the project located in a CDFA priority area or primarily serving priority populations? At our webinar on Tuesday, we defined what priority areas and priority populations are. There are also definitions in the app and program guide. And please use data to provide context for your discussion. Does the data support the issue you are addressing? If it doesn't, why do you think that may be? So for example, you're proposing that you want to address a housing issue in your community. Actually, I cannot imagine this is true in any community, but pretend you are applying for a housing issue in your community and the data shows that there's plenty of housing in your community. Why do you think it's needed? Conversely, you can use the data to demonstrate that it's truly needed. And Nate is going to go into detail on the data resources that CDFA has and that you can access and to help making your case for the public benefit and public purpose of your application, of your project. The next part of public benefit and public purpose is for you to describe your proposed solution. How does your project address or solve the issue described above, and why is your organization qualified to address it? How does the project fit within the community's broader strategy or plan? Is this in alignment with the stated goals of your overall community? How does your project address community needs? And if your project will benefit a priority population, please describe. We do have a community progress indicators on CDFA's resource hub. And as I said, Nate will go into this much more later. This section is about community engagement and public support, is where you provide evidence of community input and support for your project. So what process was used to bring community members together to design this project? Does the project have the support of the community? How can you demonstrate that community support? And does it align with already established community priorities, as evidenced by something such as a community master plan or report on a certain issue in your community or region? If you're working with other organizations, please provide the names and roles of those organizations that have or will be involved in the design, development, building, and completion of this project, along with any that will be engaged in the project once it's complete.
All right, thank you, Betsy. I'm going to jump in here and give an example of each of the areas that Betsy's been talking about. And so I wanted to mention the Southeast Land Trust conserves and stewards land for the benefit of people and nature in New Hampshire, serving 52 towns and cities of Rockingham and Strafford counties, and has conserved tens of thousands of acres since 1980. CDFA had provided $450,000 in tax credits for Southeast Land Trust, or SELT, to establish the Center for People and Nature at Burley Farms in Epping. The project was completed in 2023 and included the construction of a 7,000 square foot net zero energy building and the rehabilitation of a historic 1785 farmhouse. The work will result in the creation of a working farm, 2 workforce housing units, the creation of 2 jobs, and employment for environmental educators who provide nature-based education. The project also provides offices for CELT and at least 2 nonprofit partners, a public trail system, a community room, and a farmer's market. The organization estimates that the farm will engage more than 7,000 individuals annually. CELT actively sought community input and support to create the vision and plan, including focus groups, annual meetings, and interviews with community leaders and organizations, as well as with local businesses who saw this as an economic driver. In short, the organization spent a great deal of time and energy to educate and receive input from a broad spectrum of community members in order to develop a project that serves local needs and receives broad local support. This further enhances their fundraising efforts.
Thanks, Scott. So continuing on with public benefit and purpose, this section asks you to define outcome measures. So what are the goals and measurable outcomes of your project, and what is your methodology for tracking them? How will success be measured or evaluated? You have the opportunity here to write a narrative and answer some specific questions, if applicable, such as how many jobs will be retained or created, how many housing units will be preserved or created. We want to know what you think will make this project a success. So what's on the screen are examples of outcome measures, but we're looking for you to describe what makes your project impactful and what those measurements should be. Whatever they are, please be sure to make them realistic and measurable.
All right, Mountaintop Music Center is a Conway-based nonprofit offering top quality music education programs and concerts in the greater Mount Washington Valley. They've been doing this since 1996. They are growing but lacked space to provide instruction. In addition to securing its expanded space for instruction and performances for itself and community groups, Mountaintop will also realize several specific outcomes. The renovation and revitalization of the historic but vacant Bulldog block enables Mountaintop to remain in Conway Village and retain its existing 13 full and part-time positions. The organization forecasted 12% growth through increased enrollment and an additional 1 to 2 staff. The organization's application used census data to show significant underinvestment in the area of town adjacent to this property and demonstrated significant regional economic impact potential from the project. With a return of renovated ground floor commercial space, Mountaintop anticipates leasing 4 distinct spaces, generating 8 to 10 new jobs in Conway Village based on preliminary discussions with more than 24 prospective tenants. The commercial space would generate property taxes for Conway, meals tax revenue for the state, and an estimated $2 million in overall local economic benefit. The leases would provide a new revenue stream for the organization, offsetting most of the overhead costs of the entire 15,000 square foot property. So Mountaintop completed significant due diligence before proceeding with their application. Each of the outcomes delineated above can be measured directly through Mountaintop's financial statements, or, as in the case of jobs created, through the renovation of commercial space and through direct discussion with tenants. Back to Betsy.
Thanks, Scott. The last section in the project, in the public benefit and purpose section of the application, is the attachments. Now, none of these are required attachments, but they really do help make your case and strengthen your application. So you can use this section to both provide greater detail about the project and to demonstrate the readiness of your project. And you can use the other attachments section to upload things not on this list if it helps demonstrate readiness.
Right. This example focuses on the importance of capacity. The Belknap Mill Society's mission is to preserve the Belknap Mill as a unique historic gathering place and to celebrate the Lake region's cultural heritage through the arts, education, and civic engagement. The project renovated and preserves the Belknap Mill in Laconia, supports the downtown's revitalization, strengthens the city's curative economy, and provides increased access to a vital community resource. Their first application in 2017 was not approved by CDFA due primarily to readiness and capacity challenges, including lack of fundraising progress and a gap in organizational leadership. CDFA met with representatives from Belknap Mill, who over the following year addressed areas that needed strengthening. Key improvements in their second application included raising additional funds for renovations and establishing a paid executive director position, giving the director time to develop and implement comprehensive programming that would be the mainstay of ongoing financial sustainability for the Belknap Mill. They also identified 7 businesses that committed to purchasing tax credits, which they didn't have in their first application. Their efforts to build capacity provided CDFA with confidence that they could complete the project and raise the $390,000 gross award. Now we see the Belknap Mill and the Colonial Theater, another downtown Laconia project supported by tax credits. They're collaborating on programming and on how to best serve their community needs. Now I would like to introduce Ian, CDFA's CFO, to explain the financial requirements of the application.
Thanks, Scott. Welcome to Section 8, where I'm going to provide an overview of the required and optional financial documents in the application. For context, the key questions we ask when conducting the financial portion of the application review include, is the tax credit funding needed to complete the project? This is a statutory requirement of the program. It usually isn't a problem, but it is really critical that we understand that the funding is needed for this project to move forward. Is the applicant in good financial health? Is it stable with explanations for any significant year-over-year changes? Does the applicant's financial infrastructure meet its needs? And if there were any audit findings or other challenges in the past, have they been addressed? And then from a financial perspective, is the applicant likely to be successful fundraising for the tax credits, executing the project, and administering the project long term? So in Section 8 of the application, we'll be asking for the information that helps us answer all those questions. That starts with the organization's financial overview. And I'll just sort of quickly note that this is a 2,000 character limit in this field. That's not 2,000 words, 2,000 characters. Plan it out ahead of time, please, because some words do run into trouble there. The organization financial overview offers an organization a chance to tell the story behind the numbers in the financial documents, to explain circumstances that may look odd or inconsistent, or to add any nuance to specific financial information. For example, if the organization had a large operating budget surplus last year, and it was resulting of a one-time grant where the organization recorded the revenue but hadn't recorded the expenditures yet, we want to know why that was the case. So that, please do explain something like that. An explanation of the reasoning behind the numbers can help shed light on an organization's current financial health and its trajectory to the future. Project finance. Why does your project need tax credit financing or funding? Are you pursuing other sources of financing? If so, what other sources are you pursuing and what is the current status of those sources? CDFA tax credits have been 2% of a project's total cost. They've been 80% of a project's cost, but they've never been the sole funding source. There are always other funding sources. What's your history with CDFA? Not just tax credits, but any of our programs. Just provide a brief funding history with our organization. Include the program, the amount of the grant or loan, and the current status. We're just interested in understanding your level of experience with CDFA, if any. Other public and private investments. Has your organization received or administered grant funds or loans from other sources in the past 5 years? If so, please describe. We're interested in your organizational capacity to manage an award. Project implementation. Describe your organization's current staff and capacity to carry out the implementation of the proposed project. What will their responsibilities be? This is a readiness question. Here is your chance to demonstrate your ability to pull off the proposed project. Then fundraising plan, project specific. What is your plan for obtaining tax credit commitments? Have any business donors expressed an interest in purchasing tax credits from you in the event that you are awarded? Does your organization have the capacity to raise tax credits from businesses outside your region? This is your opportunity to demonstrate the strength of your business networks and your organizational capacity to carry out a tax credit fundraising campaign. Continuing with Section 8, specific documents requirements are clearly identified in the application and program guide, and Melissa will also put a link to CDFA's financial explainer in the chat. The link is also in the app and program guide. If the applying organization is one that is fiscally sponsored, those documents do need to come from the fiscal sponsor. And there's guidance for fiscally sponsored projects that is also linked in the app and program guide. Still in Section 8, this is a section where you use to demonstrate readiness. These are the attachments you can upload. Some are self-explanatory, but I will go into a few things. The letters of intent to purchase tax credits, sort of building what I said before on the organizational or business commitment. This is one or more letters from businesses saying that if your organization is awarded a tax credit, those businesses intend to purchase the credits. Ideally, the letters include a pledge amount or range. These letters strengthen your application because they demonstrate the strength of your business networks, again, and your capacity to carry out the fundraising. Other project funding is also important to identify. Here you share your other funding sources, and if you can, upload relevant commitment letters or letters of intent to fund. And then the status of financing for your project as a whole is a very important in the project readiness. We consider all sources of funding when evaluating the applications. Toward the end of Section 8, you're asked to identify if your organization has an operating reserve, endowment, or line of credit. This just helps helps us understand your organization's financial health and just your financial landscape. If there are things in your financial statements or other information about your organization's financial picture that would be helpful to explain, please write up and upload in the financial status review. For example, maybe your organization has a large operating reserve. This is the opportunity to explain why the organization still needs a tax credit to award to complete the project. Perhaps the endowment is restricted, or there is a planned other use for it. Or you may receive a particularly large bequest that results in a very large operating surplus in a year, similar to the example I provided earlier. Basically, if it might look loud to us, please explain it. There's also an opportunity to upload any other attachments as needed. And then the next section is the project budget. This is where you're going to provide some detailed information about the project for which you're applying for tax credit. Section has two tables for you to fill out. The first is funding sources. Here you'll tell us the funding sources, amounts, and whether the sources are committed, pending, or planned. The total of all the sources, including your tax credit request, should add up to your total project budget. And then the project budget, here you'll tell us how the funding from the combined funding sources will be used. You can also note whether any of the sources are earmarked for a specific use. Finally, we ask for a budget narrative to give us a detailed description of each line item in the project budget, the underlying budget assumptions, and any additional information that will help explain the project. This is a lot to take in, I realize, but again, it's all documented in the application and program guide and the supporting documents. Melissa, I'm seeing you coming in, so I'm wondering if there are questions about the financial section.
Yes, so we have a question about an organization that operates under a 501(c)(3) fiscal sponsor, so a Friends of entity, whose fundraising and financial activity has been consistent but relatively modest, while the organization itself has significant experience managing larger, more complex budgets. How should this be articulated to present the strongest possible application?
That sounds like I would definitely continue that conversation in a sort of future one-on-one. But I mean, to me, at the very least, it sounds like uh, if it's not clear from the financials, then just like a simple write-up that sort of explains that relationship, and you sort of provide that in the opportunities for uploading other documents.
Great. If you're a fiscal agency partner of another 501(c)(3), we would not have any control of an agency's budget, endowment, et cetera, aside from the program grants. Is that a reasonable explanation? Again, maybe a good one-on-one conversation, but something to explain in that additional information section.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Melissa.
Great. I'm not seeing any additional come up, but as Ian mentioned, we're putting out a lot of information to you this morning. So if they pop up throughout the remainder of the presentation, please don't hesitate to drop those into the Q&A box and we'll continue to pause to answer them.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time and attention, and I'll turn it back over to Betsy.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for Melissa. And yeah, all of this is a lot of information, but we have reached the end of our overview of the application. So section 10, as we started with, is certification. And we covered that first. So I'm going to now turn it over to Scott to go into the energy programs and policy.
Thank you, Betsy. So I wanted to talk several slides about our energy policy. Make sure to breathe, stretch, look away from your screen and back. There's a lot of info, as everyone's been saying, but make sure you're able to take care of yourself. Okay, CDFA aims to ensure that our investments support projects working to reduce future operating costs, improving occupant comfort and health, and improving durability of facilities. We developed an energy policy to meet this objective several years ago. The following requirements apply to all CDFAs, CDBG, tax credit, and clean energy fund applications, and to any project proposing a physical alteration to existing energy systems, that would be the building's envelope, mechanical systems, lighting, etc., or for new construction, which would include additions and gut rehabs as well as full new construction. Alternative type and levels of assessments that are recommended by an accredited energy professional or organization will be considered. New construction projects planning to reach leadership in energy and environmental design, Energy Star, Passive House, or Net Zero standards, these are all different certifications, they can waive the policy requirement with a documented intent from the design team. We still recommend following through with an energy charrette in those cases, but it will suffice for the policy if an architect says it will meet a certain standard. In cases where your project does not impact any facility energy system, applicants can explain this in the energy narrative section of the application, so CDFA can consider waiving the policy. The energy policy and links to energy consultant contacts and utility contacts are available in the application and program guide and on our resource website. This table shows the primary energy policy requirements. The two key requirements highlighted are that the applicant completes what's called a level 2 energy audit or an energy charrette, and that you consult with the appropriate utility for potential implementation incentives. We want to make sure you don't leave potential funding on the table, as these funds could help improve the project design and increase future savings. A key component is that the timing of your assessment should align with the appropriate stage of your project's design. This allows time for potential improvements in the design. Remember that the minimum requirement for your tax credit application is that you provide a clear plan for the type of energy assessment and the timing of the energy assessment. You don't necessarily have to have completed it already. We also have a set of recommendations that we take into consideration as part of our review. First, that projects try to incorporate any recommendations above energy code into their final design or equipment purchases. Second, we encourage high-performance construction, following guidelines to meet any of the standards. Third, that projects commission any new energy system. Commissioning is where a third party verifies that a system was installed correctly and then trains building staff on how to best use and maintain the equipment. Fourth, that the design team considers transitioning the building from any fossil fuel systems to high efficiency electric systems. An example would be moving from an existing oil boiler to air source heat pumps, reducing site pollution, increasing opportunities for renewable energy to support the building's heating and cooling. And finally, that projects look into opportunities for solar or other renewable energy systems. So here we've listed some potential exceptions to the energy policy. If there are barriers to completing an assessment or you have questions, please reach out to me to discuss exceptions to the policy. Again, we encourage you to reach out with any questions about the policy. Note that CDFA can also support your projects with our lending programs, such as our Clean Energy Fund loans, if that's helpful for your project. And Melissa, I'll just check in with you if there are any questions on the energy policy.
Yeah, just a quick one about whether the audit needs to have been accomplished before the application is submitted. If you could just reiterate some of those details on timing.
Sure. No, it doesn't, because again, we want to make sure you're doing the assessment at the right time with your design. So in some cases, if you're too early in your design, then we don't necessarily, we wouldn't want you to have done that yet. And all you need for your application in the narrative section is to show when you are planning to do the assessment and what type of assessment you're planning to do. Again, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help with this.
Great. I'm not seeing
Alrighty.
any additional questions right now, but also if you have specific questions related to the energy policy regarding your project, that's another great topic to bring up in a pre-application meeting to get some additional insight.
All right. Next, we're going to review the resources available to support your narrative sections about the public benefit and public purpose of your project. Nate Olson will talk about this regarding data resources. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Before we dive into our data resources, I just want to take an even higher level stance of kind of reviewing why we talk about data at the CDFA and why data matters in general. Um, One of the things we love to see woven through applications at the CDFA is the use of data, and this is because data is a powerful tool to support telling your community's story. It can help quantify needs, disparities, and opportunities in your community. Um, Data can also clarify alignment between your project goals, CDFA's funding priorities, and broader statewide issues. And that helps emphasize how your project supports trending needs throughout the state. And lastly, data can help your organization build credibility. It can be used to highlight your organization's understanding of the underlying issues and commitment to addressing community needs effectively. These concepts don't just apply to CDFA applications, but to any application. And additionally, the context and grounding that can emerge from exploring data can provide you an opportunity to reflect on and remember and reconnect with the fact that the work that all of the organizations that are applying for funding through the CDFA are part of a much larger network of work that's being done to support communities in New Hampshire. So we'll move from that into sort of actual resources that we provide. The CDFA recognizes that incorporating quality data into an application can be at times a large lift. And so one of the tools that we're introducing this year to try to reduce that lift is a data two-pager. And that's our goal is to help lower the barrier of entry when it comes to incorporating data into an application. This data resource document walks you through how to use the data that the CDFA publishes each year and incorporate it into your application. And although this resource is referencing CDFA data, it's generic enough that it can be used to support application writing and storytelling from other sources as well. So let's take a quick peek at some parts of the data resource document. One of the ways that the CDFA supports applicants is by publishing our community progress indicators each year. These indicators are a collection of 13 different data sets that help us think about how different municipalities and counties in New Hampshire might have different needs. Using the data from the community progress indicators to support your application is relatively simple, and the process is outlined in this data two-pager. I've zoomed in on a few particular sections of it that we'll take a peek at now, but I highly recommend you kind of explore the full two-pager on your own time. So the first step when it comes to this work is framing the work that you intend to fund and identifying relevant needs. In the example on our two-pager, the organization wants to fund mobile health clinics for older adults to reduce transportation barriers and expand access to care. This work can be reflected in at least one of CDFA's 13 community progress indicators. And so step 2 is selecting a relevant indicator from that list. Specifically, we know that access to healthcare or lack thereof is correlated with the percent of population that is enrolled in health insurance. And so in this case, that might be a relevant indicator for this organization. Once we choose a relevant indicator or data source, step 3 is to review the data itself. Again, in this fictional scenario, the applicant chose the community progress indicator of health insurance uninsured rate, which provides data on the percent of the population without health insurance. They found that 7% of residents in their county lacked health insurance. And in this particular year, that county had the highest rate of uninsured individuals in the state. So step 4 is to add some local context to this high level data. And so in our example, the organization works with local service providers, and those service providers have reported to them that older adults frequently postpone needed medical visits due to difficulties finding transportation. And step 5 is to take all of these disparate pieces of information and kind of wrap them together to tell a story of the work that's being done, really incorporating all of this context. So that could look something like: this organization will fund mobile health clinics for older adults in the county in New Hampshire with the highest rate of uninsured individuals. This mobile health clinic will be able to provide care regardless of insurance status and will focus on adults 65 plus who are most impacted by lack of insurance and lack of transportation. That simple summary helps tie together the local context, the statewide data, and create a compelling case for funding the project. Since the community progress indicators are intended to help the CDFA identify areas where economic investments can have outsized impacts, incorporating them in this way can clearly make the case to the CDFA why a particular project should be funded. Again, this sort of structure, we used it with the community progress indicators in particular, but perhaps your work isn't as cleanly tied to a community progress indicator. There are lots of quality data sources out there. So use a similar process, but with data that might feel more relevant to the work that you all are doing. But in general, links to these resources and others were dropped in the chat. So please take a peek at those when you get a chance. I'm going to kick it over to Betsy now.
Thank you, Nate. So we're going to now move into tax credit applications and next steps. I don't not seeing any questions in the Q&A box. So the very first next step that we ask you to do also involves Nate, and that is registering for the grants management system. So back to you, Nate.
Thank you, Betsy. So Grants Management System, or GMS for short, is the CDFA's platform for managing the full life cycle of a grant. That's from application to closeout with us. So anyone who needs access to your application or your grant needs to make sure that they create a user profile in GMS. This includes people like your grant writer that you may or may not be using. If there's an authorized official that's different from the individual who's registering for GMS initially and starting the application. any like primary or additional contacts that might want to have access to the application initially and if awarded the grant moving forward. For our grants management system, it's super important that each user have a unique login to the system. So users shouldn't be sharing accounts or passwords. Additionally, users should only have a single account. So if you have a GMS account already, perhaps you've applied to a prior funding round or some other CDFA program, you'll use the same account to apply for this program. For new users, the first step is to register at nhcdfagrants.org. We've created a detailed step-by-step registration guide if you would like, that can walk you very specifically through the process. And that's linked here, as well as on our GMS page of the data resource website. And just note that each new user registration is reviewed and approved by CDFA staff. So because we do that process manually, it can take up to 2 business days for that account to be officially approved. For existing users, you'll just log in with your current account and credentials. And if you run into any issues accessing your account, we have a password recovery video that you can watch if you're struggling to recover your password. And if that isn't getting you where it needs to get you, you can refer any questions initially to Melanie Steenbeck, and she'll help you with any registration supports that might be needed with GMS. Cool. So once you're registered in GMS, we'll now kind of review how to get started with the process of starting and submitting an application in GMS. Whether you're applying for tax credits or other funding opportunities, we have a written guide that kind of will help you stay on track if needed. But in general, high-level steps, you're just going to log into Grants Management System, accessing that login page through the link provided on the slide or on the CDFA's website. Once you're logged in, you'll navigate to the funding opportunities section, which is on the left-hand navigation menu. And this is where all available funding programs are listed, current funding programs. For this particular application, you're going to be selecting 2027, 2028 investment tax credits. And the specific ID number for that funding opportunity is 36719. So you know you're exactly in the right place. Once you're there, you'll click Start Application, and you'll be guided through each section of the application that we just walked through today. Again, if you're unsure, we have a detailed guide linked on the website that will walk you through the process with screenshots and instructions. Also, on the next slide of this presentation are, again, like quick screenshots to get you situated in the right place if you just need a quick refresher. But if you need more details, we have that too. Lastly, I want to share a few best practices or tips as we're using GMS. The system has been around with us for a long time, I think since 2009. And so there are a few things to keep in mind as you're navigating this system. One, make sure to use the resources available. The GMS section of CDFA's resource website has a bunch of detailed guides that can walk you through various processes. So if you're feeling stuck, first step is definitely to take a peek at those guides because you can get immediate help if you have any initial questions. Of course, if those guides aren't landing for you, please don't hesitate to reach out either to me or Melanie, and we can provide additional support. To make sure you're drafting your responses outside of the system in either like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or some other word processor, and then copy them into Grants Management System. This just gives you the space to refine your answers and ensures that if anything happens in the system, you don't lose your work like in the middle of drafting it. So you always have a copy on your computer. Third pro tip is start early and save often. Just make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time to work on your application. Start as early as possible. And again, like saving your work outside of the system is just a really good practice. And last but not least, related to start early and save often, is submit ahead of the deadline. So really aim to submit your application well before the deadline. It can be really stressful to be managing technical issues last minute as the clock is ticking down. And our system will not accept applications post the due date. So the second it turns 4 o'clock on the due date day of this application, applications will no longer be accepted. So really try to get those submissions in early. So if you encounter any issues, it gives you time to reach out so we can support you through making sure everything gets submitted. As I've said a bunch of times, if you have any questions, feel free, reach out to me or Melanie, and we can walk you through some troubleshooting steps. Thanks. I'll kick it back over to Betsy again.
Thank you, Nate. If you're a first-time user of GMS, it's not as complicated as it seems at first. It's really I find it quite intuitive. So we're working now we're talking about what your specific next steps are now that you've completed the webinar on applying for tax credits. So first, register for GMS or update your profile so you can start your application. Please review the application and program guide. Consider grant writing support. I'm going to talk about that in a sec. Please contact us to submit or to schedule a pre-application meeting. I shouldn't say that. You actually don't have to contact us. Melissa's going to send out a follow-up email to this webinar that will include a recording of the webinar, a copy of the slides so that you can go back and refer to them, and a link to schedule a pre-app meeting with somebody from the CDFA team. This is a 30-minute conversation with us about your project. I want to say also that in the slides that you receive in the follow-up email, there are attachments at the very end that go into even more detail than Ian presented on what is asked of you for each of the sections of the finance, section 8, the finance section, including the attachments that we're asking for. The application timeline. The application is available and open on GMS now, and you've seen Melissa drop a copy of the app and program guide in the chat, and it will be included in the follow-up email. You'll receive those instructions on the pre-app guide. So the application is due March 6th at 4 p.m., as Nate said. Between January 21st and February 6th, we are open for pre-app meetings. And then after that, until the deadline, just reach out as you have questions or need technical help with GMS. Again, as Nate said, no exceptions for late or incomplete applications after 4 p.m. on March 6th. CDFA conducts the application review from March through May, and this includes a site visit for the tax credit applicants, an in-person site visit. And then notifications of the award are the week of June 8th. Grant writing assistance support. So this is an opportunity to provide up to $3,000 to an organization with limited grant writing experience or capacity. Applications received by January 16th, which is tomorrow, will be decided on by January 30th. As I mentioned earlier, we have 2 of these $3,000 awards left to give out. And the application itself is pretty simple, and a link to that is in the app and program guide. So you should be able to find it quickly. Our pre-application meetings are a very important part of this process. We just strongly urge you to consider scheduling a pre-app meeting with CDFA staff to discuss your potential application. It's a great opportunity for us to learn more about your project, answer any questions you may have about the program or the application, and probably most importantly to you, provide some specific guidance related specifically to your project. The meetings, the link again will be in the follow-up webinar, follow-up email, and they'll take place in the coming weeks. If you experience any difficulties scheduling a pre-app meeting, just let us know. And we have now reached the end of our presentation and open it up for questions. And just thank you so much for your participation in this webinar.